to you not live, but recorded from the Associated Foundation's Training Center. It is another episode of Scuttlebutt aboard the Battleship Iowa. My name is David Camfield. I'm our Vice President, Chief Information Officer, and we will introduce our guests in just a moment. Who else do we have with us?
Well, I'm Marianne Fengler. I'm the producer in here.
Button pusher.
I am Mike Getcher. I'm the COO. Tim Chang.
I'm Russell Moore. I work at the USS Hornet.
I'm Laura. I also work at the USS Hornet.
What do you guys do at the USS Hornet?
I was going to say that's really descriptive.
I know, right? I'm actually Hornet's COO, so
Cool.
counterpart.
So Can I call you Mike? No, never mind. I'm sorry.
I might not respond to it. You can.
I do marketing and outreach, newsletters, social media, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. I actually have a soft spot in my heart for the Hornet. I did my retirement on the Hornet in 2008. You guys hosted my retirement, and many years ago, I was a volunteer out there. So,
Yeah, we actually visited back when the Iowa was up in Richmond. We pulled her out of Sassoon Bay on October 27th of 2011, and pulled into Richmond there on the 28th. And we managed to get over the Hornet a couple of times, and I don't recall the CEO at the time, but we hung out there for a little bit, visited twice at least, and he came over to the Iowa. So we got to know the Hornet a little bit. That was my only experience, frankly, up there. I met Rick at the time. I'm not sure if he's still around, but it was pretty cool. We actually talked to the Hornet about maybe taking our spot in Richmond, because it has great access there. It's also next to the Iron Triangle, but that's another story. But still, it had great access. We had a really good success story up there just for the October through May. We towed out of there on Memorial Day weekend, the weekend of the 75th anniversary of the Golden Gate Bridge. That was pretty cool. So we were up there. We liked the Hornet.
I used to live in the Iron Triangle, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, they told us not to go there.
Man, that's one of the few places I refused to obey the traffic signals, because I would get down there. I was working in Silicon Valley, and then I'd run up to the ship and spend the weekend on the ship. And I'd get there about 2:30 in the morning. Oh. And I would drive straight from 580 to the ship. It didn't matter what the signals were, red lights, stop signs, as we go straight to the ship. So,
remember the cool place, though, at the time there was a restaurant called the Boiler House down there. And it was in the old Ford factory, right next to the Rosie the Riveter Museum. Oh. Really cool. And basically, we think that we saved their business for that year. We were over there every night just about, and then everybody came. All kinds of business.
The Boiler House was a thing. I wish we had one of their menus. We have one of the grinder menus up in our conference room.
It was a great place, actually. It was a really good place.
Good memories. It was in the Boiler House, surprisingly enough.
Makes sense.
Appropriate name.
But they closed it after we left. We're not sure why.
There's so many comments about why they probably should have closed it while we were there. But that's all right. Just thinking.
Anyways, enough about us, though.
Yeah,
we'll talk
absolutely.
about ourselves.
So we have guests, and we do normally just talk about ourselves. But tell us about your ship.
All right. Well, USS Hornet Sea, Air, and Space Museum is located in Alameda, actually an old NAS Alameda Naval Air Station, in one of the berths she sailed out of. So it's really cool to be able to maintain that history. One of the reasons we probably didn't take you up on the Richmond move, but thanks for the offer. Appreciate it. So Hornet has been a museum since 1998. She has a fantastic story of being saved from the scrapyard. She was actually already sold off to be scrapped at Hunter's Point, which is in the San Francisco Bay. And as she was being towed through the bay to be scrapped, Captain Jim Dodge, who was commanding officer of NAS Alameda as it was closing down, saw the ship and decided that he wanted to effectively commandeer it for their closing ceremonies to be a centerpiece. And that was 1995. And during the duration, she had actually already been designated a National Historic Landmark, if memory serves. That was, I believe, in 94-ish. And I don't know what happened to why she was still designated to be scrapped, but that happened. But in the duration of 95, she was a centerpiece for the closing of NAS Alameda, and in that time, also designated as a state historic landmark. Aircraft Carrier Hornet Foundation was founded. In its infancy, it had another name, but that's what it would come to be known as. And essentially, volunteers, former veterans of the ship, came together and decided they wanted to preserve her and her history, because she's got a fantastic history capstoned by two major events, so World War II and then the Apollo missions. So they came together. The restoration work was done 99% volunteer driven, extraordinary, especially considering the size of the ship. And then she formally opened as a museum in 98. So we've been there ever since.
Yeah. I actually, when I started volunteering and working out there, it was 97 still. So
Wow,
we
you've
had
been
opened
there.
the doors. So kind of an interesting thing when it's been around for a long, long time. I have a picture of Hornet and a couple of the other Essex class alongside Enterprise at that same pier when my dad was stationed on Enterprise. So as a very young tot, I was there on that same pier waiting for my dad's ship to come in. Cool. So lots of history.
I love that you have as much of a volunteer aspect to it as we do. Like, volunteers save that ship too. It's pretty awesome.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I wouldn't have been anywhere without the volunteers especially in the first few years. Then they were able to bring in staff, and we've been professionalizing along the way. But obviously, volunteers are still a huge core of who we are and what we're able to do.
Cool. Yeah, we did the same thing. A handful of us were on the ship in Sassoon Bay, starting in, it would have been that first week in September, at the end of the first week, I think. And we were 6 weeks there. Nobody was paid till, almost Thanksgiving time, frankly. We really only had 5 employees when we left there in San Francisco.
I don't know. I wasn't one of them. I was a volunteer when we left there. I didn't come on board until I have been here on the payroll for 10 years in November.
Okay. Yeah, you came later in the year, but...
But I did spend an insane amount of time up there.
I know. It was just a handful of us, Jonathan, Sue, and myself, and I think Dan Pulaski.
Yep.
Who I miss? I miss Dan. Hi, Dan.
You guys probably experiencing the same thing that we do, which is that we're still restoring the ship. So we've done so much work already, but we're still opening new areas. The ship is so massive. It's a long project every time, anything that you do. So we've been open, 24 years now, and it's still not done. And so I don't know if you guys are finding the same thing, that some of the lower levels are still being restored and opened up for the public.
I think we have a different thing. We were lucky that the Navy took care of the ship literally up until the point we got it, and so although she didn't look pretty, her bones were good and the interior spaces were in good shape. For the first 10 years of her decommissioned life, she was on some kind of 45-day recall or whatever. So they kept her in pretty decent condition. She wasn't opened up. She was still sealed. In fact, Jonathan and I beat open the doors on the wardroom because we got so disgusted with the air quality inside, out there in Sassoon Bay. It was really, really sad. And a lot of the interior spaces, with a few exceptions, are in really great shape. And I think David would agree. But when it goes to opening up new spaces of the ship, we ended up with a different philosophy, partly based on, or mostly, in fact, based on just the circumstances in LA. The only jurisdiction we answer to here really is the LA Fire Department. And so they, I want to say grandfather, it's probably not the right term, but they allowed us to open up that first year on July 7th of 2012. And we had 5 decks open down through second deck, up to 05 and down through second deck. But later on, when we started to talk about opening up other spaces, they said, well, now that you're open, we really want to start imposing some more reasonable requirements on you, specifically fire sprinklers and fire alarms. And at some point, that becomes cost prohibitive for a young organization, and even for a mature organization, for a battleship with armor that can be up to 19 inches thick. I mean, there's a lot of steel to go through, and it becomes very complex in a lot of ways. So after some rethinking, we ended up literally changing the entire approach. We have this regular linear path. It goes throughout most of the basics of the ship, but we created special tours down deep, which are cool with the fire department without any sprinklers and any fire systems, because you have smaller groups. And so we have this really high quality experience for the engineering tour. It's 2.5 hours. We have the same thing for the gun tour. Your analogy would be an aircraft tour or something like that. So the fire department's happy because you have small groups that are, handheld through the entire process, and the guests are happy because basically you're giving them a lot of value. You have somebody actually talking to them about the stories of the ship and what's going on down below. And then, of course, the bean counters are happy because there's plenty of beans to count. So it kind of has turned out in a different way. I didn't expect that, frankly. I would have just expected that we opened up the entire ship when I first started. And David, I don't know, you comment on that too.
It's interesting. People always ask what percentage of the ship is open. And I have kind of a bifurcated mindset because I served on the ship when I was a kid. And the ship is not as open as it obviously was when it was alive and breathing. But we have quite a bit. We have quite a bit open, but to your point, it's a never-ending job. It's never going to be done. when you say, oh, I thought we'd be farther along, or I thought we'd be done by now, we're never going to be done. I don't think you guys are ever going to be done.
Yeah, it's a huge job, and same thing. It's just when you have a largely volunteer crew, we're 90%, much like you. In fact, we're almost exactly 90% right now, at least with the email setups that we have. So you got the same. You actually have about the same number of paid employees that we have.
I think our ratios are very similar to each other.
Yeah, we're about 23 or 4 full-time, almost
FTE,
30
right. Close to 30
part-time.
FTE.
Yeah, so we're pretty similar. Our emails go out to 500 volunteers in a week. We have more than that on the books. We see 200-ish.
Yeah, we'll see around 200 a month, 200 to 250 individual volunteers, not always the same volunteers. We have almost 2,000 volunteers on the books. Not everybody is active, and those are not necessarily volunteers that become inactive and stay inactive. It's sort of a pendulum swing. They leave for 6 or 8 months and come back. Yeah. It's kind of neat. So I have a question for you, having spent some time on Hornet. What's your favorite space on the ship?
Oh my, so many options. I mean, we are a sideways skyscraper, as you guys well know. Our lengths are about the same, battleships and Essex class carriers, but we're also 19 stories top to bottom. So but I don't know. It's hard to choose. It's like choosing a favorite child. You can't say. I have a special fondness actually though for the ship's theater, and it's kind of strange. It's currently unrestored, but it's going to be going into a project this coming fall. So keep an eye out. Campaign to restore our original ship's theater. It's just such a wonderful space and so cleverly built straight into the curve of the deck.
Nice.
They put the seating in with the steps that they've had to build in to adjust for the curve of the deck going up towards the flight deck. And it's something about it. I don't know. It's got high ceilings, those stadium seats. It's
kind of cool. Is that under the angle?
cool.
Is that?
It's right under the angle. It's on the hangar deck level.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
It's behind.
Wow.
There's a big mural on the ship currently where that depicts all the aircraft that flew off, actually CV-8 and CV-12's deck, and it's tucked in right behind there.
That's very cool.
I think I like it's hard to choose as well, but I really like the Combat Information Center. You turn out the lights, you've got all the cool dials going. It's pretty hard to beat, but it's also really fun to be up in Pry-Fly. So you're all the way at the top of the ship where they ran the aircraft operations from, and that's kind of cool. So you feel like you're in a flight tower in an airport.
I would also, I guess, follow it up on one more thing. One of the great things we're working on right now is kind of updating our exhibits program, specifically the restored spaces, and trying to build that immersiveness in. And so I think most of my ships, all the ships, can become like the favorite spot, because we're really going to try to put it back in line with the sailors are still on board and working on the ship versus like you're just chasing after them. So I'm excited for the next few years.
That is
here.
fun stuff. We're working on some immersive stuff here. Ambient sound.
Sound
is the coolest thing. I think my favorite place on Hornet, and again, I've not been top to bottom on the ship, is forward steering. It's a really unique space. I love getting up there, and last time I got in trouble for sneaking under ropes to get up.
That's so specific. I love it.
Can you tell them which ropes they should fix?
No. I was totally in stealth. My daughter says I look at everything through my museum glasses, and I'm like,
I know what chains you went under.
I don't know if I have this confused with another carrier. I'm pretty sure. Don't you guys have OPs for your emergencies? Fairbanks Morris? Because the forward AMR, I would think, that was cool.
They do. And the thing that bugs me is when they sent,
For our listeners that don't know what they are, what are they?
They're emergency diesels.
Oh, yeah.
They're a post-piston, a post-piston Fairbanks Morse. They're a really unique engine. Mm-hmm. That was my rating in the Navy. I was a diesel mechanic. I was an engineman. And one of the things that was most heartbreaking in forward aux there is seeing where they drilled the crankshaft to make it unbalanced when they basically did crash and bash when the ship went to be scrapped. Mm-hmm. They went through and intentionally damaged a lot of combat systems so that they would not be usable.
Yep.
And one of them is that Fairbanks Morse, and it just breaks my heart.
I don't know why they didn't want to give nonprofits the ability to go to war, but there you go.
Well, you're going to have a few challenges.
I know. Take the fun out of life.
Yeah.
We've been asked a number of times, well, are you going to get it underway? I'm like, would like to, but I'm kind of thinking the Department of Defense would have an issue with me taking this out to sea.
I just blame Hornet's mileage of gallon a foot. I'm like, fair, we can't afford that. Like,
fair.
Gas is expensive.
I just tell people to bring their checkbook. Because it's going to be a big. Just getting this thing underway with tugboats is minimum $16,000 an hour.
That's true. Hornet is still floating, so technically we could move anytime
right.
we wanted to.
Yeah,
With
so
that.
you're not a permanently moored vessel either.
Nope.
Yeah. There you go.
I always lobby. I think we should go to Hawaii to get our hull scraped, and then we all get to ride the ship over there.
I like that plan.
We
But of course,
tried-
it would be with tugboats. but-
We tried desperately to ride the ship from San Francisco down here, and the Navy was having no part of it.
Oh,
That we
no.
got to stay
No.
on the ship as far as the bridge, and then they made us get off.
There's still a rumor that somebody was on board. Remember the light, the
Oh,
moving
yeah.
light discussion? And I don't buy it at all.
Stowaways.
That ruins a dream for me. I gotta tell you, I'm disappointed now.
It's shattered pretty
You know,
much. We know.
I was going to say everything's waivable. You just got to work the system.
And there's a lot of space on Hornet, is all I'm saying. So.
Yeah,
That
they
was
wouldn't be
right.
able to find us.
That was
Yeah, exactly.
that was my comment to Jonathan. He says, "Do you really think you could hide on this ship?" I said, "Dude, I could hide on this ship, and the only way you'd know I was here is I'd be stealing your food."
Yeah. Well, we had power on the ship too if we needed it. But there was actually a report from one of the seamen on the towed tug that they said that they saw a light on it moving around. And
That's just ghosts, man. We're haunted.
yeah,
All ships are haunted.
Yes.
But,
Gotta blame the ghosts on that one. I don't know.
All ships are haunted. That's why I like forward steering. It's up there by anchor windlass, right? The forecastle. That's where all the ghosts on the ship live, are on the forecastle.
Not in the O2.
Really?
I mean, I don't know if you've been to our O2 recently. She's pretty spooky.
Do you have any good ghost stories from your ship?
I would, but I also say we do ghost tours on our
Do
ship,
you?
so I would encourage listeners to go attend
Nice.
those. But yeah, we do. I mean, it's fun. Actually, I recently did a podcast about the haunted aspects of historic places. Actually, it was really interesting because it was an archaeologist, anthropologist who was kind of looking at ghost stories from an anthropological mindset, and just kind of the accessibility and I'm going to say clickbait, but of ghost stories and kind of that. But it's
Yeah, that happens.
our 1MC system also works.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like what we do here. This is basically, this is our volunteer Carol. She's lovely. We just talk about people's service time, what they did, and welcome them to the ship.
Interesting. I like it. Little stats and
Yes, please continue to hold.
it's actually amazing. We've had Battle of the Bulge survivors, Pearl Harbor survivors. I mean, everything come aboard the ship, and you'll hear this once in a while. It's just amazing.
that's very cool.
We're having a memorial in July for Mickey Ganich, who was a Pearl Harbor survivor. I think he died at 102.
Nice.
And we had him on board the ship the year he turned 100. Still pretty active up to that point.
Yeah, we
Amazing
had
guy.
Freeman Johnson.
Freeman Johnson,
came in,
yeah.
oh, amazing, and he was 101.
101, almost 102.
Yeah,
We took
got
him
down
all the
to
way down
the-
to 7th deck.
Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah,
down
it
to
was
the boiler
amazing.
room and stood where he used to stand and actually remembered things. It was amazing.
Started poking around corners like a kid. It was
Yes.
adorable.
I mean, how old is Dale? He's in his mid 90s.
Dale must be, I heard 95 or 6, I think.
A Korean War veteran.
wow.
Still, he's a young 94, 95.
Yes.
I wanted to
Love
guess
that.
it.
Yeah, that's the cool stuff here.
It really is. That's one of the things I was asked today. I was doing an interview with PBS, and they said, "What is your favorite part of the job?" And I'm like, so many to choose from. But one of them is just seeing people come back on board. It's kind of cool. I was being interviewed down in engineering, and I rarely make it down to engineering anymore, but that's where I worked on here. So I get nostalgic the lower in the ship I go because I'm not there very often now, and that's where I served. So
Yeah. It's interesting. One of your staff members asked me what was the number one challenge I had, and we can all jump to the easy stuff, the low hanging fruit of money or whatever. But it kind of struck me. It's like we don't lack for inspiration. We don't lack for love of what we do. We don't lack for almost anything. I just lack time.
Yeah. Yes,
Time
very much.
kills me. And I don't have enough time to do what we do.
I think that's true. I don't know how you guys feel about that. 24 years in, you're twice as old as we are, or
Yeah.
even more. It just seems like we just started, and there's
So
never
much.
enough time.
Yeah.
You think about it, you finish painting one end of the ship and you go to the other end, and then the first end needs to be painted again, right?
Yeah,
Just like an active ship. It's crazy.
Yeah, and we have a lot of activity here too, like you do. In fact, it's kind of been spoken about from several other organizations. I mean, you could have 30 to 40 or even on some crazy days 50 volunteers here. I mean, there's always something going on, and that activity is really what keeps things going.
Yeah.
It's just fun.
I mean, we still have a very vibrant ship restoration crew, and we differentiate that from the air group, who exclusively restores our aircraft. So, and I know ship restoration is about 75 strong at this point and come in 2 days a week. But Hornet swallows people real fast. I'm sure the battleship does too here at Iowa. You could have 1,000 guests on board and barely feel it because you could see like 2 of them on the hangar deck, and then they're all actually down on the 2nd and 3rd deck.
So how much do you guys have open?
Percentage-wise, I don't know. That's tough.
It's hard because there's so much space that would just not be fun to go into, really. I would say restored, maybe 70%. For self-touring, probably reduce that back down to like 40%. We let guests self-wander around hangar deck, flight deck, and 2nd deck. So we've set that up. And, I know that many ship museums do the track, which is, it's a good way to do it. We kind of enjoy the self-exploration aspect because we have our whole 2nd deck accessible, or most of it, through loops of it. We also have staff offices on the 2nd deck, so not every door is openable. And then, we do docent tours down into other ups and downs, up into the island superstructure, down into the engineering, or down into the 3rd deck where we have more enlisted living spaces. So,
and the O2 level, CIC, and that kind of stuff in between the flight deck and the hangar bay. So that's another spot for tours.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any other things that we do? Because we have eras. We've still got some stuff that reflects the 40s and the 50s, and we definitely have a lot of 80s stuff. So do you have the similar thing on Hornet?
Yeah, well, Hornet served between 1943 and 1970, and actually went through a fairly serious modernization in like 54, 56. 2 of them actually modernizations put on our angle deck, and a lot of spaces removed. So we do have some rooms that probably have been like they have been since World War II and the original construction. We have some spaces that were not where they were. Like, for example, sick bay was where our 2nd elevator used to be. So technically that is a very much 1969, 60s sick bay. And we try to be honest to the timeline as we can, but when spaces allow for it, or when the spaces themselves suggest certain time periods, but we do kind of play between that World War II up to the 1969, 1970 timeline.
It is hard when there's a distance. I know for me personally, I get asked the question a lot, "Oh, is that original?" And I'm like, I was on here in the 80s, original to me.
Well, also one of the first totally amazing and silly questions we got was, well, are you going to restore her back to World War II configuration? We're like going, no. I mean, the parts are gone in some cases. I mean, 4 of the 5-inch mounts were removed completely. Superstructure modifications. And sure, there's a ton of World War II and Korean War fabric here, a ton. But you can't return it back, and then that's really disrespectful of the other 2 eras.
Yeah, that's the one.
You can't walk away from that.
We'd have to add like 60 anti-aircraft guns. We'd have to remove the angled flight deck and make it a straight deck again.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. But that's actually something that I won't name them, but other organizations have struggled with. In fact, there's another ship much like us, big long pointy one with that struggled with taking off some of the paraphernalia up on the bow. It just. It's kind of an identity crisis, I think, in some ways, and it doesn't make as much sense to us. We have to embrace all 3 eras. Yeah. It is what it is, and tons of the engine room and everything else, like you guys called it, stick shift or
600-pound stick shift. I laughed when you said that there was a lot of Hornet that was still in the World War II configuration. In 1987, when I reported on board here, the big thing was new Navy, new Iowa, blah blah blah. And we would get down there, and our thing was the battleship Iowa, completely modernized from the main deck up.
It's the engine you're not changing, right? I mean, that's what you don't touch.
600-pound